A lot of big events still happening in Britain. It's great going to Saudi. The Americans have still got phenomenal fighters, Terence Crawford, and the wonderful night at Times Square when we've got Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia and Teofimo Lopez, and you've got Boots Ennis fighting coming up. And so it's alive and well. And I'd like to see a sort of bit of a resurrection in America, and I think that's what they're going to aim for with HBO and Showtime sort of moving out of it. I think they really want to push the States again, but British boxing, I mean, people saying it's broken. British boxing is absolutely flying. It's terrific, and it's great because, as you say, you were inspired. I was inspired by the Barry McGuigans. Tommy Hearn's my hero, and now I see the young who are inspired to come on, and they want to follow in the footsteps of AJ and Fury, or they want to follow in the footsteps of your Amir Khans, your Ricky Hattons, your Kell Brooks. It's great times, and especially for the women too. Lauren Price coming through now, and that big fight made with Michaela Mayer, and you've seen Katie just, the flag bearer for women's boxing, and Tasha and Terry Harper, 3-weight champion, defending her world title on the big show in Doncaster in May. It's great. Great fights, great nights ahead, and great time to be in boxing.
Look, Adam, you're absolutely like an encyclopedia, and somebody who does podcasts and speaks on stages himself, public speaker, etc., can only be in awe the way you sort of conduct yourself as well. Everything is like a storytelling. It's like a process you go through, this way, that way, what it actually is, what other people are thinking. I want to find out what made Adam Smith. I mean, did you always want to be a commentator? Was you always good at talking? Where did this start from? Talk to me back. Let's go back in time. And you're 9 or 10 years old. What's happening? What's going on?
I think there's two words that have carried me through life. One is passion, and the other one is sport. I'm a sports nut. I love pretty much every sport. My family will tell you, I could watch anything, whether it's in no order. Tennis is probably my favorite sport. Boxing's my business.
Really?
It's a strange one to say, and I love boxing and fighters to the core. But watching sport, I love watching tennis. I love football. I'm a massive Liverpool fan. Have been since I was 4 or 5 years old. My kids, 2 of my 3 kids are. I love everything: snooker, darts, rugby, cricket, golf. I just everything. I love sport, racing. There's something about. I think it was because I was not very good at it. I think it was because I was always trying to get into teams and never quite made it, or I'd get into the B's or C's. I'd never quite make that sort of team. I would be 12th man on the cricket pitch. I was always sort of missing out, and so I guess I got quite good at talking about sport and watching it. And I says if all my friends were better sports people than I was better at talking about sport than them. My mother's family, quite a theatrical family. My dad's in retail. So where did it all come from? I was very shy as a kid. I had friends, but I was very shy. Got bullied a little bit at school, which was tough. And I think I escaped into both the theatrical and sports world quite a lot. Sport was massive for me. So when I was about 9 or 10, I bought a dictaphone. So one of those little tape recorders. And I used to practice on the dictaphone or in front of a mirror, being a commentator.
Really?
So I guess I wanted to be, I think my mum wanted me to be an actor. But again, I acted a lot at school and at uni, and I did drama at uni, but I was not very good. I was definitely not as good as everyone else who was there doing it. So, but I thought I did love talking about sport. So I think it was always on, I always wanted to do it, whether it was ever going to, because at that time there was like John Motson, Barry Davis on the football, Dan Maskell at the tennis, boxing with Harry or Reg, Ian Darke. There were very few people who did it. So people were like, well, how can you, this BBC, ITV, Sky was just coming through, just an embryonic company, really. They're like, so how do you go about doing it? And that was the hard part. And that was the part that I wasn't going to say or wasn't going to take a no to. And I think that's that's the message, I think, for anyone who wants to do this. You've got to be passionate, you've got to be dedicated, and you've got to have a huge amount of resilience, because a lot of people say no. I commentated into the dictaphone. It wasn't just boxing. I mean, my heroes were Kenny Dalglish as a footballer, Sammy Lee, the Liverpool players. I looked up to John McEnroe. I loved... who else I love in tennis? I love, so many. Monica Seles. There's so many tennis players I adored. In cricket, David Gower was my hero. So yeah, Barry McGuigan and Tommy Hearns probably. David Gower at cricket. I loved Jockey Wilson on the hockey. I loved Alex Hurricane Higgins, and then in later life, Ronnie O'Sullivan. I think you can see what the sort of the geniuses I like, the maverick geniuses, the Gowers, so gifted, but then used to sort of get out to weird, why was he, come on. I love the stories. I love the Kenny Dalglish, the magician, and then going on to become a manager. I love following journeys. I think that's the key. I loved following people. And so it was any sport. It didn't matter whether I was going to be a football commentator, a boxing commentator, a tennis commentator. I just wanted to be a sports commentator. And I went to a very academic school. And my sort of peers there were all going to go into the city or into George Osborne was in my year, former chancellor. So obviously he told me, I said to him one day when we were sitting around, I said, what are you going to do? Because he was talking about politics. He was a very good debater. I said, what are you going to do? What are you going to be? And he goes, I'm going to be prime minister. And I said, oh, wow, that's a pretty big. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to be a sports commentator. I said, I'll tell you what, let's see who gets there first. Yeah. And when I became a sports commentator, I dropped him a note because he'd only made chancellor. He never became prime minister. But no, I mean, look, he obviously did incredibly well in politics. But I didn't want to do that. I remember going around the careers fair at school and thinking, I don't want to go in the army. I don't want to be in medicine. I don't want to be an accountant. I don't want to do any of it. I want to be a sports commentator. How do I do it? And the way I did it was I wrote a lot of letters. I wrote to John Motson. I went to see him for a few minutes. I tried to be around people. I wrote so many letters and got so many rejections, but I had a name on it and I just went to see them for a chat. People were fantastic to me and, they encouraged me. My grandfather's best friend, I don't know if you know horse racing well, but the two great commentators were Peter O'Sullivan on television and Peter Bromley on radio. And I got an early chance to be in Peter Bromley's commentary booth at Ascot. And he had these big field binoculars. And I was fascinated as a sort of 12, 13-year-old boy looking at him and thinking, how does he remember all these horses' names? And he had this sort of color chart and there was, a big sort of field of 30 horses and all this. And I was just mesmerized. Honestly, Sean, I was thinking, how does he do it? And he got these big binoculars and he was going, and they're coming around the final bend. And I used to do this when I was a kid, before my voice had broken. I was really good at the Grand National. I'd be, and Corbière on the far side, and here comes Hello Dandy. And for me, it was all about that excitement. So I was copying him and trying to be like him and in awe of him. And I guess, I just wanted to do it from a young age. And I went to a local newspaper, the Ham and High. I did a few articles from them. I eventually went through university. I realized that acting wasn't going to happen, and it was all about getting into TV. I went after university. I did a time in America. I did university here at Warwick. Every one of the guys there will tell you then all I wanted to be was a sports commentator, and now they tell me now it's that they've done all sorts of things in their careers, but they're like, you did what you wanted to do from day one and you weren't going to stop. And I've never said I'm a good commentator or whatever. I tell you what I do though, Sean, I put so much into it. I love it. I'm passionate. I respect fighters so much. Every one of them that gets in the ring. And, look, I found boxing. I worked in news before. I worked at CNN in Washington. I worked at ITN in London. I worked a bit at NBC. And I ended up sort of banging the doors down, getting into Sky Sports. And, Vic Wakeling, the head of sports there, and Mark Sharman, they gave me an opportunity to do some voice work. They said, what sport do you like? I said, everything. They said, we've got a space on the boxing team at the moment. I said, that'll do nicely. I love boxing. And that was it. I fell in love with all the fighters. I got Barry McGuigan walked through the door within a few months, and my boss said to me, "Oh, you'll be working with Barry around the country doing previews and working with fighters." And I was thinking, "Oh my God, Barry McGuigan's like my hero." And then someone said, "Oh, and can you call David Gower? We need him in." And I was calling my hero. And still, when I walk past David Gower in a corridor, whether it was at Sky, when I see him at Lord's, when I see Barry McGuigan around the ring, I'm that kid. They're still on my walls. So I'm still a fan. And I think that's what it is. I always wanted to be a commentator. Ian Darke was an